What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Master Crafted. We are finally picking it back up. We got to finish out the series for our WTC layouts. We've been grinding some games. We had Challengers Cup, we had LVO, and then we've just been working on the stream. We finally got that up and running. Big things for Master Crafted, but we figured we gotta keep grinding, putting out content. So Phil, what are we doing today?
We're going to go over the next WTC layout, which is Tipping Point, one of, if not the most common WTC or deployment types that we see across GW and WTC. I like it a lot. It's one of my favorites because it is offset. It does have the obvious naturals, and it works really well in terms of board state. Yeah, so it's one of my favorites. I get why all the TOs use it. I know why, Lane and I have talked about it before. It is a very balanced board. But let's see what WTC looks like on a balanced board like Tipping Point. Lane, any initial thoughts with this deployment?
Yeah, I think Tipping Point is going to be, from a little bit we've kind of like previewed and looked through, it definitely seems like it is a little bit more of the balance and is trending on having a little bit more of like open board options. I felt like, especially going through Search and Destroy, things were fairly heavy a lot of the time. And then Crucible of Battle 2, I felt like was pretty heavy, all things considered. It's probably the most balanced board after Tipping Point. But I felt like it still was skewing a little bit heavier than some of the other options. I think, Tipping Point might be the most open of like the more truly balanced boards.
Gotcha. Fair. Absolutely fair. All right, let's get right after it. Okay, so one of the things you're going to see on Tipping Point, just in general, obviously we have our WTC containers that are in, I would say, an interesting spot, because they are preventing our opponent from getting a straight shot onto our natural. We can be like partially exposed, but the one thing that stands out to me is right off the bat, it is very easy to get into this shooting lane and punish both sides of the board. So you can poke out here. You can punish things that come out to the middle objective, because those two L's are obviously great staging L's, because this L protects you from your opponent's like easy shooting lane, and then the same thing on the other side. It's obviously very easy to get off after the center objective. You can see the ring for that objective. It is on the other side of the wall, so you actually have to step on the other side to be on it. But right off the bat, that definitely stands out to me as one of those things that's like very obvious for shooting armies, and there is benefits here for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say, looking at this board, especially those middle ruins, like you're saying, absolutely phenomenal. Maybe some of the best we've seen on a board. Like, you can't get more protection from angles than that right there as you're looking at a board. But the other thing you notice, it's so far. There are those crates, but the distance between like true safety between your natural and your opponent's home, or their natural and your home, like that's just a lot of no man's land. So when you're looking at this board, we've talked a lot about trying to flip the board and really get after something. It's honestly probably going to be easier to, after you secure your natural, go press their home, right? Getting assets to go deny their natural is going to be very, very difficult on a board like this, because there's just not a lot of cover and not a lot of room to stage. You can maybe cheekily like have like a 5-man of JPIs that are kind of hidden behind that container that have enough movement, to wheel around and maybe go get after it, especially, if you have advance and charge access. But other than that, like, unless you're infiltrating right next to your opponent's natural, you're going to have a very, very hard time denying on this map. But the bright side is they're going to have the same struggle.
Yeah, this is definitely, you need a few more tools. You need maybe some, you need some infiltrate, you need some advance and charge, you need some extra mobility, because you're right, Lane, this map definitely feels quite open compared to what we've seen from WTC as a trend prior to this point. So definitely more open. These middle staging L's are obnoxious towards that center objective. Absolutely. None of the terrain pieces actually go to the edge of the deployment. So technically there are lines on both sides down the edges. It's not much, but it is interesting because it is easy to threaten. And then we already talked about our shooting lanes. We can get after our opponent's home if they're not careful, right? There are lanes on both sides to get into things. So like, I would say this is an open board, with the one drawback that there's a great staging ruin in the center, which makes me feel like this board is a little more balanced than what we've seen on WTC boards from the ones we've reviewed so far.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, the other big thing to note is while it doesn't touch the edge, both of those ruins that are on the naturals, you cannot fit any vehicles through those gaps, right? Like, I don't even think, it's an inch off on the corner. I don't think you're even squeezing like mounted things through there, right? You can't, there's not a lot of thin profiles that are not infantry or beasts that are going to be able to skirt around there. If you have bikes or some cavalry that can maybe squeak through, that's something you really probably should be looking at, maybe trying to use to your advantage if it's something your opponent isn't expecting you to be able to wield that direction. But yeah, I agree. I think, the middle, amazing staging for combat, but a nice wide open board for some shooting armies as well.
Absolutely. Okay, Lane, what is this layout? Tipping Point 2, what the heck is going on here?
I mean, it's excessively open on one side, and then just, you can hopscotch all around on that thing around your natural. If you can't stage around your natural on this deployment, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's pretty excessively taken care of.
So not only do you have like a pocket L that you can be off the profile on, you have another staging L here. You have your opponent has no way to get into this because you have like multiple areas that you can put units in. Obviously, it's just obnoxious. Overall, it is like one of the weirdest layouts I think I've ever seen. There is nothing in this backfield. This backfield is wide open. So like deep strikes, rapid ingresses, anything like that. If you're able to get back there and somebody has a shooting asset on the other side, it doesn't even matter if I give you 9 inches of deep strike here. I'm just going to kill you. I'm just going to kill you. This is very strange.
And I don't know. I just feel like now as a TO, like we've kind of been going through some of these. I feel like I just have to put this in one of my tournaments for a teams event just to say I did. After looking at this, I mean, this is just crazy. I will say, your shooting assets, especially like tanks, the best way to go about this is going to be to just be putting them wholly within ruins and trying to use those walls to just make as narrow of line of sight as you can to where you can get a bead onto something, take care of it. And then hopefully that's hard enough for their next asset to really move into, is kind of the theory, right? So like we'll talk about how would I go about protecting my home. I would have, a tank behind that middle L, the red terrain profile. And then as soon as I think they're going to be trying to push my natural with something that's like staged up behind that crate or something, I want to be able to just sit on the terrain and threaten that zone. But I need to make sure I'm bubble wrapping, right? If I'm playing World Eaters and I don't have a nice hefty screen in between myself and their units, they're just going to come tag my tanks and eat me in the middle there. But the nice thing is, right, if you get that bubble wrapping done, you can do the same thing on your natural. As long as you have a kind of little screen, or if you've at least bought that space beforehand, you can sit wholly in that ruin that's on your natural and just kind of see across the board into their terrain profile while being about as safe as you're going to get while trying to hold that angle, right? So we're still looking to try to use some cheeky things like this on this, but I don't think you want to be playing a shooting army on this at all.
No.
But if you are, that's how you need to be going about it.
Yeah, because we can't, like Lane already hates it too. You can't get to the center objective. You can't get to this natural. You can't get to your opponent's home. Not without being obnoxiously close to anything, and you will just lose. Like, I'll be honest, I don't know how you win this with a shooting matchup. It is awful.
You are a defender, you see that they put up a shooting army, and you go, perfect. We're both going to hate our lives for the next 3 hours, and you just pick this. And have a nice stagnant game where your tanks can't get into anything super easily.
Yeah, it's not great, but it would be fun. It would be a very interesting layout to have in the terrain pack where like you have to make some serious considerations where one, you want this probably gone to one of your good defenders early, and two, you got to make sure this does not get to the point where like a good defender can use it into you.
Yeah, you cannot risk putting up a shooting army while this thing is on the table as an option for a melee defender. You just can't.
Yeah.
Or even just like somebody who's like Necrons. Like if they're just running, a bunch of stuff that's hard to kill, they're just going to outscore you because you're never going to be able to get like actually enough damage into anything with how easy it is for them to swamp that board.
Correct. Absolutely. All right, Lane, the next layout. This is a little bit more traditional, a little bit more what we're used to. Tipping Point 3. We have our very traditional containers here in the middle, which we've seen in past layouts. We have our L's that are a little bit more exposed. We do have decent shooting lanes down these sides, right? So it's not the end of the world. Our natural is very, very safe, which I do like. I think on both sides, right? This is a great place for units. Obviously, our opponent has a staging area in here, so we're going to have to contest with something. But that staging area and that natural is very well protected. And we do have backup staging L's here, right, where we can be in a position to still re-engage into whatever comes in to try to push us on our natural. So I like this layout a lot. I think it's quite good and balanced, which is fantastic. I think I like this layout a lot. It has the traditional things that we like to see.
Yep. Going back to now we're touching the board edge again, right? We have some of those classic rapid ingress spots that we should be looking at near our opponent's naturals, just because there's a fair amount of line of sight blocked, right? If they aren't threatening that shooting lane and putting something in there, you're now free and clear to just kind of drop something outside of your deployment zone, run over there and knock them off of it. That now is back on the table. Other than that, the middle, we're going to be trading out as necessary, just because it's, again, so easy to just keep moving assets up there into that middle ruin.
Yeah. Nope, absolutely fair. But overall, I think we both agree this is a balanced board.
Yep, 100%.
Alrighty.
Layout 4 or 5. These just seem so vanilla. Besides layout 2 in Tipping Point, just being whatever the heck that was. Like, these boards so far have just been so much more like, oh yeah, this is kind of what I would expect, I guess, for WTC. Like, they seem pretty balanced, all things considered.
Yep.
Compared to a lot of these other ones where it was just like, why is there just 4 pieces of giant terrain all within 8 inches of the center of the board? Like, there's just so much going on some of these. And it's like, this is just, you're like, oh, yep, that seems like a pretty normal board. Like, it makes sense. There's staging everywhere, easy to hold your natural, easy to contest places. The middle is probably the biggest thing where, like, that's going to be your struggle. You're going to be probably wanting to have something that's lone op that can float around those crates and then go step on the middle whenever you need it to for scoring. But, like, other than that, you're playing, I try to contest you, you try to contest me, and then somebody eventually is going to have to put something in the middle.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. And the shooting lanes that stand out to me here are ones that actually force you to trade. So, like, if you need to push out to the center objective, obviously you have this one here, but that's not guaranteed because if our opponent stages properly, like, they can be behind these containers and be in a good position where maybe the shooting assets that we have on this side of the board actually have to come into this pocket here to shoot downfield, which means our opponent's natural is right here, which means, like, there is the potential for a trade, which obviously will, for the majority of opponents, will prevent them from just putting a unit there to begin with. So, yeah, value across the board. Really, really like this because it does force and engage on trades. But you're right. This middle is relatively exposed, right? If you don't have lone op, if you don't have stealth, if you don't have, like, an obnoxiously durable unit, you're going to be in for a tough one.
Yeah. Let's keep it rolling. Tipping Point 6. Man, I feel like this is just like almost same but different. A little less cluttered in the midboard, a little bit harder on the sides. But, like, it's just a fairly normal 40k board. It's going to be a little bit of a stretch to get units out into that midboard. You're honestly probably going to be, relying on some stuff with a fair amount of speed. Just judging from where that blue ruin is, right in the that corner of our deployment zone, that's about 8 inches probably to get out onto that objective, which means that's just it's just enough out of reach that it's going to be kind of hard to go interact out there. if you need to do actions or things like that with just average, 6-inch move units. Yeah, but again, just standard 40k, man.
Yeah, I will say on this one specifically, these natural objectives are probably less easy to hold, right? Because you have access on both sides of that piece of terrain that can actually trade on it. And I think this is probably one of the ones where if primary scoring is like take and hold or linchpin or something like that, you're probably going to see a lot less scores across the board because it is so easy to trade and do those things. And there's a lot of armies that can trade effectively in different ways, right? They can auto see you on here. Maybe they go into combat. Maybe they just shoot off the objective or whatever the case is. These naturals are a lot easier to trade on versus the others that we've seen so far. So, like, just a general thing to put in the back of your head, an army like GSC, an army like Guard, an army like even I would say I want to say like T-Suns too would really like this layout because it is very easy to get on those objectives. Depending on what you're running, flip them even without going into combat because I can pack a lot of units on the dominant side of that objective.
Yeah, for sure. It's even closer on the staging, right? Like the last one wasn't that far away, but like you're right on top of it already. So yeah, feels right. If you're looking at teams especially, and you're like, man, what's my differential going to be like if you're going into one of the armies that Phil was just talking about? Like this is one where they could really abuse you if you do not have as many training pieces as they do, because they're going to deny, and eventually, if they expend all the resources on your own natural, they're just going to be sitting there behind that terrain piece and super hard to interact with. For some armies that maybe don't have the speed to get back over there or don't have the combat to really just go fight them through that wall again.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think that's really good. I will say another thing that stands out to me here is these backfields, right? Like this space here, obviously because this terrain goes all the way to the edge, is kind of dangerous, right? We have to be very, very careful in terms of screening our backfield because not only could they, deep strike or rapid ingress and not get shot, it is also just a safe place for them to put those units because they can obviously get after this natural objective if they need to, and they can also try to push this your home. So you have to be very, very careful in some of these armies to not let them do that on you.
Yep, 100%.
All right, tipping point 7. This one also very, very similar, but because we do have these exposed L's that we can use to get after our opponent's natural on both sides, right? But this L is the main difference because it has flipped. Obviously, our blue walls have moved up further. Our 5-inch walls have moved up further, so they're no longer touching the edge of the board. But the place I want us to focus on is these natural objectives because they are unfortunately fully exposed now. There is nowhere to hide. You have to pretty much use your opponent's staging piece of terrain to stand any chance of controlling your natural objective.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing. In this scenario, a lot of the times, if you have the infantry and the wave after wave to keep pushing that side, this is not a board you want to be playing a super chassis heavy list in or monster heavy list, because honestly, we've talked a lot about flipping the board. Usually, that is like I am going to just try to turn the board, but I'm going to like keep my natural and push past it, right? And just really try to get assets farther up the board. On this one, we need to do that to our opponent's natural, right? We need to go push all the way through, get it secured, and then push almost to that blue ruin in their deployment zone, because that's going to be the easiest way for us to hold primary, right? If we're just trying to hold our own, supposed natural on in the normal sense, it's so easy to get shot off, fought off, all those things. We need to have some assets to keep trading over there and denying them from doing what we're trying to do. But in general, you're going to have a much easier time being an infantry-heavy army, playing on this and just pushing your opponent's natural, because that's the one you're actually going to be able to secure in the long run.
Yeah, you need to get all the way inside this piece of terrain. You have to, because if you don't, like Lane is saying, you will just keep getting traded on, and then you may not be able to find a points advantage, and we have to find a points advantage if we're going first.
Yeah, and like the big combo, the big tech piece, like you're really going to be trying to do, especially into melee matchups, you're going to be trying to get into that little pocket that's behind the ruin, but on the objective, and then you need a good heroic threat sitting right behind it in that L, to where when they come to try to take it back away from you, you're like, boom, here I am. Our fight's first unit is sitting there, something that's relatively tanky or is at least going to pull enough of the wounds off and be able to pick up whatever they trade. Things like that to try to get that space early and lock it down without having to spend multiple turns just chewing through stuff, right? We're trying to assert dominance with a trade like that.
Yep. But this can suit certain armies for sure. And you just got to be able to have those trading assets to play into a game, especially WTC. I feel like that's a trend that we're seeing. It's just you have to be able to trade efficiently. And if you don't build to that, you may find that you're going to struggle into some armies and some matchups because like Knights as a whole, obviously layout dependent, but we have these huge walls where a lot of these objectives are covered and we can't get to them and you can't get around the corner and you have to run through them, whatever the case is. But because they don't have enough trading assets, they're going to struggle more versus armies that have obnoxious amount of trading pieces where they can hide a lot easier than on GW boards. And it can be really difficult for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Know where your trades are going to be. I think in our most recent game where Phil and Andre were playing, and it was on Purge, that was a very good example of having the foresight of, is this is going to go trade, that's going to come trade, this is going to go trade, right? And just try to imagine, what the game state's going to be and how that game is going to progress, because you're really going to need to have those assets just ready and layered to go one after the other to do that.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
And then layout 8, similar, very reminiscent of some of the hammer and anvil ones that we went over at the very beginning. Crates on the edge of the board, right there by the middle, just off your natural. But now the natural's on the other side, right? Because those objectives aren't across the midline of the table, and you can actually kind of hold them. If you push up into that terrain piece towards the front, you can get on there. Look how far it is to get there from any of your opponents. Their best bets from that middle terrain piece, and that's still probably like 14 inches to get across there. So they better be fast, better have their jump pack, and then they'll come trade with you.
Yeah, these terrain, as you were saying, around these naturals is really interesting because our opponent could technically get into this profile to shoot down onto our natural if we had something on this objective, right? That doesn't necessarily feel that great. Our opponent also can poke out here to punish anything that's kind of like in this lane, which is not great either, right? Like it doesn't feel awesome. We could have a unit maybe on this bottom side, maybe just like hugging the wall where it's trying its best to hold that objective, because this is quite a large gap. Looks like 21, 10, 11, 12, like 12 inches just to get to this other side, 13 to get onto the objective. So that is not an easy distance to cross, and that is fully exposed. So there are ways we can hold on to this natural. We just got to be a little bit more inventive in terms of how we list build to get there. So once again, I'm going to repeat it because I say it over and over again. Are you running lone ops? Are you running units with stealth? Are you running durable units with sticky? Do you have ways to sticky after a unit dies or an activation where you don't have to necessarily be on the objective to control it? All of those things make a difference for playing the game. And like, this is the kind of stuff that separates a good player from a bad player, is like, are you building lists to the terrain you are about to play in? Teams is a huge part of it. Like, I can kind of get away with it on GW. Some of the layouts and stuff like that are so similar that you don't need to focus on it too much. But on WTC, if you're not building for the terrain, especially in the teams environment, like, I think you are wrong.
Yeah. If you do not have a lone op, I agree. I think like that's the baseline, right? If this is even remotely in the player pack, unless you're first defending and you will never see this for some reason, your ass better have a goddamn lone op just in case you end up on this thing, right? Like it's so insanely hard, I feel like, to play on. Like it maybe not be hard, but it just, by having a lone op, this map becomes 10 times easier to play on, right? And the other thing too, though, right? We need to still be conscious of like what our opponent is doing and how we can still interact with that, right? We now have the opportunity to say, hey, are you threatening the crossfire lane all the way across the board with something? If not, I'm gonna just keep things off the board and I'm gonna wrap it to where I'm behind this crate, and then it's much shorter for me to get onto your, get onto your natural. So that's one of those things that we just really are trying to look at. How are we going to play this, right? And so we've got to be doing that, because on layouts that are just, I mean, almost the middle, it's close, but like other than those two ruins right in the middle, it's so hard to interact with your opponent as a melee army.
Yeah.
It's so far away to get to the natural, to get from your natural to their home. Like it's just a very big gap in no man's land here.
Yeah, because okay, people may say, but Phil, Lane, this is a great staging area. It's like, yeah, for like one unit, maybe, because if our opponent has any shooting assets staged here and you put value in that terrain piece, well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to push up here and punish that asset, right? Like, I'm going to be waiting for you to put something of value. And even better, if you're like, oh, well, like I don't even need to go up that far, but I've double stacked a unit in here and I have another unit that's here in the back. Well, I guarantee you they can draw a line from here to punish without actually having to expose anything. Like they don't need to come out to deal with that. And it's like, that's actually not as good of a staging area as you want it to be. Yes, I understand it's like, it's all right. It is not great. And then we already talked about why this staging area isn't fantastic either. We're putting ourselves in a really tough situation on all sides of the board. So if you were to go into a shooting matchup as a combat army, as world eaters with like a bunch of lack of forged fiends, and you're just like, I'm going to take 90 berserkers, I'm going to run it down my opponent. This may be not a desirable layout for you because you're just going to get shot off.
Yeah. I mean, you just put them all right behind that blue home ruin, and then you just go, I'm sending 80 berserkers at your natural. What are you going to do about it? Some will make it there, right?
That is the world eater way, it seems.
I mean, I don't know what else you do in this match. I mean, you have one asset or two that are trying to play in those middle ruins, but this is just a horrible, horrible option.
Yeah. It's not great, but it is interesting, and I think Tipping Point as a whole, that whole set of terrain pieces, I really liked. I think there was a lot of variation there, which in a lot of the other deployments we didn't see. We just saw like the same map or the same 2 or 3 map copy and pasted over and over again. Those were like 7 different sets, which was fun.
Yeah. No, that was really good. I'm super stoked we got to do this series. It's given me ideas as a TO of what I'm going to make you all play on. So, looked at them thoroughly, get a nice balanced set of bullshit is what I'm going to call it, of what we're bringing to teams. So glad we got to do all the WTCs.
Yeah, it's been great. Definitely learned a lot. Hopefully you learned something too. If you have any points of feedback or anything like that, Lane and I are always open to it. As Lane said in the beginning, we have started the streaming channel. I've been on now. I've played 2 games now, which have been fantastic. And please go give it a watch. We're always focused on improving and bringing you as great 40K content as possible, and doing so in a way that hopefully you enjoy. So please keep commenting. We really appreciate it. And we'll see y'all soon.
Yeah. And last but not least, do not forget that victory isn't given. It is forged, and it's forged right here on Mastercrafted. We'll see y'all next time.
See you guys.